So yes, I'm going to be talking about Islam's engagement with Judaism, At-Tabari on Muslim-Jewish relations in early Medina, who's a slightly later Islamic author. So I think it would be good for me just to explain what I did last year, so you can kind of see a comparison. I saw what I would describe as a lot of structural similarities in Islam and Judaism that you don't necessarily have between other religions. Whatever we have in Judaism, there always seems to be an Islamic equivalent, and vice versa, whether it's Sharia, Halakha, or anything. You know, there does seem to be what I call structural similarities, and that kind of led me to investigate the primal interaction, the very beginning of the relationship between Muslims and Jews through 7th century texts, so through the texts that were written at the time of that first interaction. So my findings last year were that Jews and Muslims considered one another fellow believers. The Arabic word is mu'minun. Together they formed the first ummah. Their protections were enshrined in the document of the Constitution of Medina. Muslims were allowed to practice their deen, and Jews were allowed to practice theirs. And I have a slightly different definition for deen than modern Arabic might espouse. And they were one religious community, but they had separate practices. So a very kind of close relationship between Muslims and Jews very early on. This might look scary, but it's just to kind of visualize and show you guys what I'm doing. As you can see at the top, where it says Medinan period, first main Jewish-Muslim encounter, I looked at documents from then in my first year, and then we have the development of Islam and the passing of history, and then it comes to, within the Abbasid dynasty, we have At-Tabari, who is this author who writes some, very detailed works. And so there's a lot of time between the very early period and At-Tabari. So what's going on here is the kind of coalescing of material, and there's lots of material flying around, and people like At-Tabari compile all of that kind of oral transmission of hadith and akhbar and all sorts of other sources. So why At-Tabari? Why am I looking at his work? Well, he wrote two kind of magnum opuses. The first was his comprehensive history called Tarikh al-Rusul wal-Muluk, which is, one of the most famous histories ever written. And he also wrote the most detailed Quranic exegesis, so a tafsir called Jami' al-Bayan and Tafsir Ay al-Quran, which also is about 20 volumes. So I'm looking at the latter, which is the Quranic exegesis, and why the tafsir and not the tarikh? Well, At-Tabari was more careful about the tafsir. Tafsir is a commentary on the Quran. So if you're commentating on God's word, you need to make sure that everything you say is perfectly correct. If you're commentating just about history, well, you can be less critical. So tafsirs therefore endure more serious criticism and study. Tafsirs are made up of athar and not akhbar. For those who are familiar with Islamic history, athar are more religiously oriented oral transmissions, whereas akhbar can be related to any sort of time period in history. And the tafsir is not translated into English, so I'll be doing it directly from the Arabic. So just a kind of visualization here. So 7th century documents, what they kind of showed was that it was the first interaction between Muslims and Jews in Medina. That relationship was very, very close between Muslims and Jews. Religious, social, and political rights of Muslims and Jews were enshrined. You can see that through the Quranic verses that I analyzed, and you can also see that through the Constitution of Medina. Together they formed the first ummah. And there's a lot of kind of discussion on the word ummah and what it means, and what its linguistic meaning is, and what its shari'i or religious meaning is, but we can kind of summarize it as the religious community of Islam. It definitely has a religious undertone to it, and the role of the Prophet Muhammad is linked more to his position as an arbitrator between the Medinan tribes than solely as Prophet of God. So the reason that the Prophet Muhammad even went to Medina was because the warring tribes of Medina invited him so that he could be an arbitrator, he could be in charge of affairs in Medina. And that role is far more prominent in the 7th century documents than what I will discuss in a second. And then we have At-Tabari's representation. Now, I haven't actually looked at At-Tabari in extensive detail yet. I've just started my PhD, but I'm presuming from what I know about him and from what later documents what their rhetoric is regarding the early period. So this is what I think I will find, and I will ask questions about it. So we have the first interaction between Muslims and Jews in Medina. They're presented as more distinct groups. While rights were enshrined, religious, social, and political squabbles are emphasized rather than the conciliatory relationship. Perhaps Jews lived in the first community of Islam, but surely they can't have been founding members. And that the role of the Prophet Muhammad is linked to his undisputed divine authority as God's prophet, rather than as an arbitrator. So this discrepancy, this is what I would like to essentially analyze. Why is it so different why is it that later documents present a relationship that is more dichotomous, more Muslim and Jewish, more separate, and not more together? So that's me. You?